Today we're going to talk about annotation in science, but first, let's ask ourselves, why do we need to do annotation in science? Okay, and maybe just to bring us back to our data-driven conversations, this is what we looked at the data from our students, okay, the past assessments and PSLE. We realized that other than the topics, our students have a lot of difficulty with open-ended questions, and they actually don't seem to understand the question. They don't understand, and they cannot answer to the question. Okay, so that's the reason why today we're talking about annotation in science. So let's keep in mind that annotation is to help our students to understand the question. Okay, because if they don't understand the question, they won't even try to answer it. They won't even feel like answering it. Okay? So we want to give students some steps so that they can break down long questions, okay? So that they don't freeze like deer in headlights when they see questions with a lot of information. Okay, so keep in mind the objective of annotation is to help students to understand the question. Okay, now two main things, two main parts that we do for annotation. Okay, first is to help students to identify the success criteria of the question. Success criteria meaning, what do I need to successfully answer the question? Okay, what do I need to successfully answer the question? To do that, we will get our students to highlight all the command words such as state, predict, explain, and based on the command words to choose whether to answer using CER, okay, or cause and effect. Now, the second part is to help our students to identify science concepts in the question. Okay, what topic or topics, a few topics that the question is testing, and the related science concepts. Okay, once they know the concepts that the question is testing, they can highlight words that help them to link to those concepts. Okay, so first, let's take a look at the command words. Okay, now there's also a Word document with these command words, with this table, okay? But what is the point of this table is that um, uh, we have CER as our science department thinking routine, but many students have the misconception that they always need to use all three parts of C, E, and R. Well, that's not always true. Let's take a look at an example. So imagine you have the command word state, okay? So the question can be something like, state a property of fabric. Okay, well, then all you need to do is to make a claim, okay, just to see that fabric is flexible. Okay, another possible question for state is, state which of the three cars is the fastest, A, B, or C. Well, then all they need to say is that B is the fastest car. There's no need to give evidence or reasoning. Okay, but on the other hand, if the question asks them to explain, okay, so for example, explain why water plant B has less oxygen produced, then they need to link it to the evidence and a science concept to explain the reason. So you need the C, E, and R. Okay? So for example, the reason that is important here is that there are fewer bubbles seen. There's evidence. The reason is because there's less light to photosynthesize. So the word here that's important is photosynthesize, and the reason is important is because that's the science concept being tested. So if there's no word photosynthesize, then we don't know that the students understand that the question is about photosynthesis. Okay, so that's how we use command words to help our students understand the success criteria of the question. Okay, let's take a look at an example. So here, okay, this question is about the topic of forces and the concept of friction. Okay, so that's the first thing the student has to understand. It's about friction causing a car to stop. Okay, now once the student understands the concept that it is about the concept of friction, then the student can underline the word wet. Okay? Wet is not a science word, but it is linked to the concept of friction, and that helps the student to answer the question. Okay, so that's how science concepts are important in the question. Now, for command words, the command word for part B here is give a reason. Okay, and that's where the students need to bring in the concept of friction to answer the question. So if the question is answered in any other way that misses out the concept of friction, then they will lose marks. Okay, that's because that's not what the question is asking for. Let's take a look at another example. Okay. Here, the topic is on life cycles, and we're looking at reproduction, the concept of reproduction in life cycles. So, the command word here that's highlighted is explain. Okay, which month would there be the greatest number of cases, and explain why. Okay, so to answer the first part, the claim is May, so the month of May has the greatest number of dengue cases. Explain why. Okay, so here we have to bring in our evidence from the table, okay, and the science concept of uh, uh, reproduction. Okay, so another example here. Okay, this question is on the topic of heat, and two science concepts are tested: the concept of conductors of heat and the concept of heat loss. Okay, so the command word that's highlighted here is explain. Okay, but in this question, the claim is already in the question. Okay, explain how this setup uses a property of air to keep greenhouses warm on a cold day. So the claim is that it keeps greenhouses warm on a cold day. So that claim is already in the question. But what students need to bring in is the evidence from the diagram and the concepts of air being a poor conductor of heat and reducing heat loss. Okay, so um, we don't require our students to write this in the exam, the C, E, and R, but it helps in our explanation and it helps them to remember to bring in the science concepts when they need to explain. Okay, so some FAQs. Should I annotate every question? Well, we have to ask ourselves, will annotation help students to understand the question better? If it's already a straightforward question, then there's probably no need to annotate it. Okay. Next question. Is CER needed for every question? Okay. First of all, CER is only for open-ended questions. Okay. There's no need to do CER for MCQs. Okay. The purpose of CER is actually to help our students not to over answer or under answer. Okay. For example, if it's just a state question, okay, it helps our students not to waste time giving the evidence and reasoning. Okay, that's just wasting writing time. Okay, but if it's an explained question, it reminds our students that they must bring in a science reason. There must be a science concept in their answer that uses a science word. Okay, last FAQ. What's the difference between evidence and reasoning? Okay. Now, evidence is what we see from the question or from the data. It can be from a graph, it can be from a diagram, it can be from a table. Okay. So that's evidence. Reasoning is based on a science concept. So, for example, the science concept of photosynthesis, the science concept of friction, and this science concept is usually not found in the question. Students have to remember it. Okay, but it is not important to differentiate between evidence and reasoning. That's not as important. Okay, what's important is actually to remind our students that when they explain, okay, when they answer and explain question, they need to bring in a science concept in reasoning. Okay, so this is just a recap of the two purposes of annotation: to identify the success criteria of the question and to identify the science concepts, and then to highlight the words that link to those science concepts. Okay, so we will answer any questions on Zoom, and then we'll break out into different breakout rooms for our breakout discussions. Okay. During the breakout discussions in your breakout room, just choose one of the three questions, just one of the three questions, and discuss how you would use annotation to help students to understand the question. Okay. Please actually do the annotation so you can highlight in the PowerPoint or any other app that you want. But otherwise, you can always highlight in the PowerPoint itself. Okay. Just to mention, these are all PSLE questions, and you can already find the answers by the side. Okay. What I want you to do is to work on the annotation. Okay. So once you discuss in your groups, we'll come back together and get one member of the group to share how you would annotate. Okay, so let's do our questions and discussion now.